The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, July 13th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ari Berman, senior reporter at Mother Jones covering voting rights, author of Give Us the Ballot, The Modern Struggle for Voting Rights in America, on the state of the vote. Meanwhile, Texas Democrats deny Republicans quorum again in a bid to stop their voting restrictions. Several men involved in the Haitian assassination of President Moïse were apparently U.S. law enforcement informants. Cuban government arrests at least 100 in the wake of protests. And in the midst of a COVID explosion, Tennessee fires its top vaccine official for promoting vaccinations. Biden public land drilling approvals reach oil man G.W. Bush levels. And monthly payments to families with children begin now. Check your bank accounts. NYCHA, the largest public housing agency in the country, apparently ignored ventilation warnings during the pandemic. 2,000 member strong SCotUS strike into the third week for Cook County, Illinois employees. And the House Democrats want to meet with Angela Merkel over the German blockade of the vaccination patent waiver. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. I'm here, of course, with Emma Vigeland. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Sam. Andrea Merkel.
What did I say?
That's what you said.
Angela Merkel. Did I say Andrea?
Yeah.
Well, I call Brendan Brenda. I mean, look, everybody knows what we're talking about.
You're right.
I don't need to, we don't need to be formal about this.
Accuracy over precision.
Thank you very much.
Good work, Matt.
Did I say Moïse right? Yep. Yeah. Who else is doing that in the media? Nobody.
Yes, certainly
So,
not Sam from yesterday.
There you go. Well, all right, Emma. Let's see, we're keeping score around here. Yeah, that's good to know.
Jeez. I'm going a little hard. I apologize.
Yeah, that's all right. It's a little early in the day for that, but we will get there. Thanks for joining us, folks. Again, apologies to Angela Merkel. I know she's a fan of the show, and whenever we bring her name up and I get it wrong, she gets a little upset. So we have Ari Berman on today. We've got a lot to talk about. We are just, let me put this in a sports metaphor. The pitcher has taken the mound, and the pitcher is just about to start his or her wind up in terms of the infrastructure bill. We're in the wind up phase. Really, almost just in the first rock back off of the rubber, as it were. So we're going to have more to talk about that in the coming days. But the big issue right now And to some extent, we're hearing a lot of this because of what's happening in Texas. A lot of this because of what happened with the Supreme Court. But also, from a legislative perspective, there is a sense that the infrastructure bill is at least on the right track. That between the bipartisan bill and the reconciliation, there are no Democrats that need to get on board outside of maybe a reluctant Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. But I would imagine at this point, there is a sense within the Democratic caucus that we have those two votes for at least a big chunk of what we already have decided on. The real extant issue is, what are Democrats going to do about the franchise, the votes? We have seen, and Ari Berman will tell us the details on this, an onslaught of voting restrictions across the country. And this is just the beginning. The Supreme Court has made it very clear as to how open they are to disenfranchising people. And the real question is ultimately going to be, what are the Democrats going to do about it? Are they going to do anything about it?
Biden's supposed to be giving a speech about this, and my prediction is it's going to be gobbledygook. Like, what can you do without outright calling for an end to the filibuster, which he's not going to do?
Well, this is the bottom line. And this is the bottom line. Ultimately, what are they going to do about it? Are they going to give a gobbledygook speech or even a good speech? Here is Texas State Representative Rafael Anchia. And this is at least what the Texas Democrats are doing. Every time Greg Abbott is calling into session, calling the lawmakers into session to vote on a restrictive voting rights bill, the Democrats have said, we're going to leave, and you're not going to deny you quorum. Yeah. And here is that one of those Democrats right now.
And we are not going to buckle to the big lie in the state of Texas, the big lie that has resulted in anti-democratic legislation throughout the United States. We said no when the big lie came to the Capitol in Texas and darkened our door. We said no during the regular session, and we are saying no during the regular session.
And the thing to remember is, in Texas, these guys, they're not full-time lawmakers as far as I know. And so they're not there that often.
And there's a finite period of time where anything can get passed in Texas. In the
However,
legislature.
Governor Greg Abbott, who, remember now, is facing a challenge from his right flank. Is it Allen West?
Yeah.
Used to be from Florida. Abbott is now saying that he's going to continue to call special sessions. Here is Greg Abbott.
What the House of Representatives can do, the Speaker can do, is issue a call to have these members arrested. In addition to that, however, I can and I will continue to call special session after special session after special session all the way up until election next year. And so if these people want to be hanging out wherever they're hanging out on this taxpayer-paid junket, they're going to have to be prepared to do it for well over a year. As soon as they come back in the state of Texas, they will be arrested. They will be cabined inside the Texas Capitol until they get their job done.
This is going to get interesting. So the bottom line is the Texas state legislature meets for up to 140 days in every odd number year. So,
a system that makes sense.
Of course, right. Odd number years are the ones that desperately need legislation. And but the governor can convene lawmakers for a 30-day special sessions. And I think he can maybe do an unlimited one. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with this whole arresting and all of that stuff. I mean, this harkens back, and there was a poster right up there when Wisconsin lawmakers did this in the 2011, trying to stop Scott Walker from turning Wisconsin into a right-to-work state. Now, the difference here, in addition to the specifics on the ground in the Senate, in the state, is that broadly speaking, there's a lot more sort of national support for what's going on in Texas within the Democratic Party. Barack Obama famously said he would put on his walking shoes, soft walking shoes, and walk with people who were protesting, and they never came to the aid of those folks out in Wisconsin. The question is Joe Biden going to come to the aid of those in Texas and, frankly, all around the country? We're going to talk more with Ari Berman in a moment about that very topic.
Right. But this is, just quickly, this is a demonstration of how Democrats can use their leverage even when they're not in power. And on the national level, they are in power. So.
All right. A quick break. We'll be right back with Ari Berman. Folks, I don't do a tremendous amount of writing these days. Sometimes I do, sporadically. But even when I do Twitter or whatnot, something like that, I want it. Well, first of all, Twitter's, it's got a character limit. So you want to be able to express what you're expressing in a certain amount of things. And I have found I haven't found it. They came and they said, is this something that you'd be interested in advertising? And I said, let me check it out. And it's really cool. It is called Wordtune. And it's artificial intelligence, but it's basically like having I don't know, they don't call it this, but for me, it's like having a writing coach. It is AI powered. It understands this is not like a grammar correction or a spell check. It understands what you're trying to convey. And it basically gives you suggestions on how you might present this idea in a different way or in a modified way. It uses the most advanced language processing technology out there. There's no other writing tool that I've ever seen online that can do what Wordtune can do. It's ideal, I would imagine, for professional writers who are looking for an edge. Even if you're a manager and you got to write an email, or you're just writing an email to somebody, this is, I would imagine, for students also a great tool to use. For me, I don't always take the suggestion that Wordtune gives me, but it makes me think about what I am trying to convey in a different light. There are times I do, but there are other times the exercise of it in and of itself, the hackneyed thing they used to say about writing was it's all about your rewriting. And on some level, this process speeds that process up. It's pretty good. You got to check it out. Wordtune works anywhere you're working online. You can download the applet and put it right into your browser, or you can go to the site itself. For me, I'm actually really liking it embedded in my browser. But it works anywhere you're working online: Google Docs, Slack, Outlook Web, WhatsApp, more. And my listeners can try Wordtune for free at wordtune.com/majority. That's wordtune.com/majority. Get help writing your emails, your reports, your presentations, your resumes, your blogs, whatever you're writing. And you can do it today. Go to Wordtune, wordtune.com/majority. Check it out. Really, it's actually sort of fun to play with too. So check that out. Meanwhile, want to welcome back to the program senior reporter at Mother Jones, covering voting rights, author of Give Us the Ballot, The Modern Struggle for Voting Rights in America, Ari Berman. Hello, Ari.
Can't hear anything.
Can you hear us
This is an
now?
inner monologue that we're hearing from Ari. Ari, can you hear us?
How about now,
All
Ari?
right, let's take a break and we will work this out with Ari. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder and Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. And joining us once again, Ari Berman, senior reporter at Mother Jones, author of Give Us the Ballot, The Modern Struggle for Voting Rights in America. Hello, Ari. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, guys. Sorry that the technical difficulties are like the technical difficulties to our democracy right now, I guess.
That is a wonderful way for you
What
to
a segue.
start with a perfect metaphor. Thank you, Art. Let me ask you this, and I probably have asked you this over the years multiple times, and the question becomes almost more salient each time we talk. When you wrote Give Us the Ballot, The Modern Struggle for Voting Rights in America, were you writing, didn't you think that was the end of it, right? I mean, this was before this major assault on the vote. Like, did you anticipate that your expertise in voting rights would be called upon over and over and over again because of this onslaught?
I mean, as an author, you'd like to think that your books will have an impact, but you also hope that like at some point you'll outlive them. So, I mean, like, did I expect 6 years after my book came out that the Supreme Court would gut the rest of the Voting Rights Act and that Joe Biden would have to give another major speech about voting rights and that Texas Democrats would have to flee the state again to protect the right to vote? Like, no, I didn't think we were headed to this point. Did I think we'd see a candidate try to just outright overturn an election and then incite an insurrection when that didn't work? Like, no, I like what we were talking about back then was really bad. What we're talking about now is a whole nother level of insanity when it comes to voting rights. And it's this paradoxical thing because on the one hand, there's a lot more attention to voting rights than there were before. But that's also happening because the right to vote has become so much more precarious than it was before. And so it's like this weird thing where, yes, it's great that it's getting so much attention, but the only reason it's getting so much attention are because things keep getting worse and worse.
All right. Let's start with the latest Supreme Court rulings, or even let's start before then. Let's talk about, just so broadly speaking, this is all coming out of the assault on Section 5, which I think was in 2013 now, yes. I guess, by the Supreme Court, where it took off the pre-clearance requirements for, I think it's about, I don't know, 16 counties across the country, in 12 states. You can correct me. But for the pre-clearance. And then we just saw this massive onslaught of voting restriction bills. Where are we since, let's say, the beginning of this year, or since the 2020 election, in terms of bills that have squeezed the right to vote?
So what the Supreme Court did is it said in 2013 that states with the longest histories of discrimination no longer had to approve their voting changes with the federal government. That affected 16 states, 9 entire states with a history of discrimination, places in the South and West, and then parts of 7 other states, including some parts of the North. And that basically opened the floodgates to voter suppression in places like Texas and Georgia, because if they wanted to enact a law, for example, in Texas that said you could vote with a gun permit or not, but not a student ID, that no longer had to be pre-cleared with the federal government. Or if Georgia wanted to purge hundreds of thousands of people from the voter rolls or close 200 polling places, that no longer had to be cleared with the federal government. And then what happened this year is there's been a dramatic acceleration of those efforts. So we actually crunched the numbers. So I'll give you 2 different sets of numbers. From that 2013 decision to today, 26 states have made it harder to vote, including 10 states that were previously subject to the Voting Rights Act. In this year alone, 17 states have made it more difficult to vote, in past 28 new laws doing so. So basically, there's this continuum, right? There's efforts to make it more difficult to vote before the Supreme Court guts the Voting Rights Act. There's more efforts to make it harder to vote after the Supreme Court guts the Voting Rights Act. Then those efforts dramatically accelerate after Trump tries to overturn the election. All these state legislatures get back in session and try to weaponize the big lie through other means. And that's what we're seeing in Georgia, Texas, Florida, Iowa, Montana, et cetera, right now.
There is, I think, I mean, and we don't hear this too much, but I mean, Trump accelerated this, but this was we should be clear, this was a Republican phenomena, right? I mean, and I can't remember his name now, but the godfather of redistricting, the Republican operative who passed away, whose daughter, who was estranged from his daughter, and she handed over these hard drives essentially, or exposed them. I mean, just talk briefly about that element of this, because he was a longtime Republican operative. This is a Republican agenda, and how that agenda has just changed more in how naked it is. There's no veneer is really the only difference.
Yeah, you're talking about Tom Hoffler, who was the longtime Republican gerrymandering expert, who basically figured out ways to racial gerrymander to protect white power and to hurt Democratic power in places like North Carolina. So you can have a 50-50 state, but there's 13 Republicans and 2 Democrats. I mean, that's kind of like the genius of what he did. That's gerrymandering, but I mean, it's 2 sides of the same coin with voter suppression. And basically, I mean, you can go back a very long way. I mean, I talk in my book about how people like John Roberts in the 1980s were trying to weaken the Voting Rights Act. But certainly, a lot of this accelerated in the last decade. And really, first off, it was a response to Barack Obama's election, that when Republicans took control of all of these key states in 2010, the first thing they did was make it harder to vote and then also gerrymander to entrench their own power. So things like widespread voter suppression in places like Wisconsin, that predated Trump. But as you say, Trump just said the quiet part out loud. And what was different about Trump versus other aspects is Trump just tried to blatantly overturn an election, right? And that was more than Republicans had been willing to do in places like Wisconsin and North Carolina. So the anti-democratic tendencies were there, but then Trump took it to a whole nother level. And then he really made voter suppression the central rallying cry of the Republican Party, because these efforts were kind of fringy before then. Like, there wasn't a leader to the effort. There were state legislative Republicans that were doing this, or there were people like Tom Hoffler, right, who were doing this, obscure GOP strategists. You didn't have a Trump-like figure that was going around the country saying, let's throw out all the mail ballots. Let's cut off all the early voting days. Let's make sure we get all the votes thrown out in Detroit and Philadelphia and Milwaukee, where all the black voters live. I mean, that was really a Trump-like phenomenon. But I think the more disturbing part of it is basically that the Republican Party is succeeding where Trump failed right now, because they're going through the normal channels. I think what they learned from 2020 is, if you try to do this in an irregular way, and in a blatantly illegal way, the courts aren't going to allow it. Some Republicans won't even stand up for it. But if you just try to rig the election ahead of time through the normal political channels, well, we can do that. And by the way, everyone in the Republican Party will basically be invested in it. That you might have a Georgia Secretary of State stand up and tell Donald Trump the election was fair, but that same Georgia Secretary of State is going to go along with his party's restrictions on voting. And basically, they realize that this strategy is ultimately going to be a lot more successful than to just throw out the votes after the election strategy.
In some ways, I mean, what Trump did was he gave the Republicans room to sort of move forward. He basically drew a new line as to how far out you can get away with stuff. And we played a clip yesterday of Rick Scott at CPAC. And when they were talking about Republican values, the first thing he said was, election reform was a major Republican value. I want to remind people, like, to the extent that there have been any problems with elections, it is not addressed by a single thing that any of these people have proposed. I mean, they have created this problem. All right, so let's go to the most recent Supreme Court rulings. You mentioned John Roberts. In 1982, Ronald Reagan signs an amendment to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. He does so over the advice that he was given to the opposite by a lawyer in the Department of Justice named John Roberts. Talk about a guy with a mission. May we all be so lucky to want something and 40 years later be in a position to actually just almost unilaterally make it happen. And John Roberts did just that, didn't he?
Yeah, in 40 years, you too, Sam, can achieve your dream of destroying the Voting Rights Act. But what happened was, John Roberts, like Samuel Alito, they were foot soldiers in the Reagan Revolution. They wanted to roll back the civil rights laws of the 1980s. There was a Supreme Court case in 1980 that basically said you had to show intentional voting discrimination to be able to strike down a discriminatory voting system, which was very, very difficult to prove. You had to have smoking gun evidence of someone basically saying, yeah, I passed this to disenfranchise Black voters, which by 1980, 15 years after the Voting Rights Act was passed, people had sort of stopped doing that kind of thing. So this was a very weak blow to the Voting Rights Act. Congress overruled the Supreme Court and basically said you just had to show that a discriminatory voting plan had the impact of discriminating against a minority group, not the intent of discrimination, which was a lot easier to prove. And then they not only changed that language, but they restored the Voting Rights Act for 25 years, neither of which Ronald Reagan really wanted to do. He didn't really want to sign a new Voting Rights Act, and he certainly didn't want to sign a strengthened Voting Rights Act, but there was a bipartisan consensus in Congress that does not exist now. There were influential Republicans like Bob Dole that worked with liberals like Ted Kennedy to draft a new Voting Rights Act, a coalition that's completely just evaporated today. And so what happens is basically—
Ari, there, yeah. I want to remind people too that dynamic in the 15 years after the Voting Rights Act is approved, the idea of proxies being used as proxies for race, being used as restrictions on voting, was exactly what we saw following Reconstruction, right? I mean, that is the Jim Crow era where the Supreme Court was like, actually literacy tests and poll taxes, that's not so bad. And that regime lasted for 70 years in some instances.
Yeah, because what happened is places like Mississippi and Alabama, when they wrote literacy tests and poll taxes, they used really racist rhetoric, but the legislation itself was race blind, meaning that the literacy test never said we're only going to prevent Black people from voting, but exempt white people from this requirement. So the Supreme Court could then say there's nothing explicitly racist about this, ignoring the entire design of the law, but just narrowly looking at the text. And of course, that's how they were able to uphold things like literacy tests and poll taxes for so many years. So basically, John Roberts loses this fight in the 1980s. Then he becomes Chief Justice. And in 2013, he weakens he gets rid of this requirement that states have to approve their voting changes with the federal government. But he says there's this other part of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, that applies nationwide, which he targeted in the 1980s. He says this part still exists. We're not touching this part of it. But of course, you knew once they touched one part, they were going to get after the other part. And so they have this incredible bait and switch where 8 years after gutting one part of the Voting Rights Act, they then gut the other part of the Voting Rights Act that they swore they would not touch. And basically, they do exactly what Roberts wanted in 1982. They make it functionally impossible to strike down racist voting systems unless you're going to be able to produce smoking gun evidence of racism, which, by the way, it's not even clear this court would recognize that as racist, given the kind of things that Samuel Alito says. And so it's just amazing to me, you know, Roberts and Alito are working together in the Reagan administration 40 years ago. And basically, this has been their project for the last 40 years. And they've been almost entirely successful now at carrying out, at rolling back the civil rights laws of the 1960s and more than any other in terms of rolling back the Voting Rights Act. And so basically, the two pillars of the Voting Rights Act, one has been completely eviscerated. The other is essentially on life support. And so the law itself is basically on life support if Congress doesn't do anything to fix it.
Well, talk about just, though, the shifting of the burden of proving what is a racist law and what isn't, right? Because I think key to understanding how they gutted it. So the initial Voting Rights Act, essentially, it was on the burden, it was the state's burden to prove that their laws essentially weren't racist. And now this bizarre interpretation by the conservative Supreme Court has flipped that burden to prove that these laws aren't racist, which is impossible to do, right? Because of, you know, it essentially has to be a smoking gun. The law has to say, I am racist, I don't like Black people, I don't like Hispanic people, whatever the case may be. Like, that's such an insane legal standard, but that seems to be the one that they're trending towards or barreling towards.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the Voting Rights Act was designed to protect voters from states. It was designed to protect voters of color from states like Georgia and Alabama. And what Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act did was it put the burden on places like Georgia and Alabama to prove that they weren't discriminating. And the other part of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, made it easy to win these kind of cases. Even if the burden of proof was on minority voters, they still had a lot of ways to win these challenges. Now, basically, Alito is saying, we are going to protect states instead of voters. We are going to protect the rights of states to do voter suppression laws over the rights of voters to be free from voter suppression laws. And we're going to do that by basically saying, as long as the state has a theoretical interest in preventing voter fraud, even if they haven't actually shown any evidence of voter fraud, that is going to be a legitimate state interest that we're going to give great deference to. Meanwhile, minority voters are going to have to clear all of these incredibly high bars to be able to prove that their burdens outweigh the state's burdens. And that's just a completely radical interpretation of the Voting Rights Act. Because as I said, the Voting Rights Act was supposed to prevent voter suppression from states in order to protect voters of color. And now what Alito essentially is saying, we are going to protect states' ability to do voter suppression instead of the voters that are facing voter suppression. And he just completely made this up out of thin air. I mean, they added what they call these guideposts to interpreting the Voting Rights Act that aren't anywhere in the congressional record supported by the Voting Rights Act. I think that's what's so frustrating to people is it wasn't even like they were relying on some sort of legal standard. I mean, they just completely made it up to justify an outcome that they wanted. And essentially what they're doing is they're institutionalizing the big lie. I mean, that's all it is. That's the same kind of stuff that Trump said. We know there's fraud. We're not going to prove it, but we know it exists. I mean, that's basically what he's saying. If Arizona or Georgia or whoever gives that defense, we're going to basically buy it.
There's a lot of stuff I want to talk about what it's going to mean for the concept of disparate impact going forward, and also what it means in terms of like states, the state's interest, because if there is no evidence of fraud, like it lowers the bar as to what a state, not just an individual state, but literally the government can do, it seems to me, and acting upon a hypothetical as opposed to actually real world events or problems. But I want to just go back to one more thing about that two-step, because the one step being 2013 and the two-step being 2021 or the 2020 session, they did the same thing. It seems to me with the other case that they resolved. I know this is a little bit outside of your portfolio, but the disclosure laws. Citizens United, the argument was, we can allow all this money because at least we have disclosure laws. And that was found to be like, there's a little hitch there. Like, it's disclosed after the election. And so.
Or not at all.
Or not at all.
Yeah.
And then in this most recent ruling out of the second one that came down with this DNC one, the Americans for Prosperity, they've basically taken a hatchet to that disclosure requirement as well. This is the thing that people need to understand, is that none of these cases exist as discrete entities. They become building blocks for the future. And we can say back in the Section 5 case in 2013, we saw the same thing by Scalia at that time in rejecting the explicit action by Congress. Will you just speak about that? Because the Scalia dicta in that case, where he basically said, I know the Senate reauthorized this 5 years ago, but they just did so because they were afraid of being called racist. I mean, that was basically what he said, right? I mean,
that is basically what he said. I mean, he said that the Voting Rights Act had led to what he called a perpetuation of racial entitlement. So he viewed the most important civil rights law in the US history, which ended the disenfranchisement of Black voters for decades in the Jim Crow South, as becoming another, what he called racial entitlement. And basically said, oh, the Voting Rights Act, it sounds so great. Who's ever going to strike it down? Basically, what he was doing was transferring the authority of the court to make judgments for Congress. Because when he says, oh, it's such a great piece of legislation, you'll never change it, well, then the only option left is, okay, well, the courts have to step in. And you're basically saying we're going to substitute our judgment for Congress's judgment, which the court is not supposed to do, particularly if you believe in judicial restraint, right? And they've now done it twice because they ignored the large congressional record in support of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, and they also just unilaterally rewrote the 1982 reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act in this latest case. And you're right about what these cases do, because every time there's a Supreme Court decision, people try to adjust to it, right? So people use Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act because Section 5 no longer existed. And the same thing, they added new disclosure requirements in California because of Citizens United, right? And the thing is, there's always a grand plan here. And the grand plan here is make it easier to buy elections and harder to vote in them. I mean, their ultimate future would be a system where there's no regulation of voter suppression laws and no regulation of dark money laws. I mean, that's the ultimate thing they want. Now, there's going to be some limits on it, right? But basically, they want both of these areas to be totally unregulated. They want the states to be able to do whatever they want. They want as much money as they want, because that ultimately serves the things they care about, which is advancing the ideology of the Federalist Society, which is put power into as few hands as possible. Essentially the hands of rich, white, conservative men. And that's what both of these decisions will have the impact of ultimately doing here. And so the decisions really go together in a very neat way. And you start to ask yourself, what's the point of trying to respond to things the court's doing if the court, when you respond to them, is just going to say, we're going to take away that avenue as well down the line? And that's, again, where I think that congressional action, plus, honestly, some sort of changing or reforming of the courts has to happen. And it looks like Democrats are going to do neither. So they basically just let the 6-3 court do whatever they want for decades.
If it remains a 6-3 court, right? I mean, Justice Breyer has made it clear that he is going to resist any attempt to sort of acknowledge the reality. And let's talk a little bit about that. There was a piece I was just reading by Emma Green in The Atlantic about the judicial picks, and there is a coming realization on some level, maybe, that the Democrats have been, I think this is from the piece, chumps. They've been bamboozled, or maybe some people would argue they've been purposefully naive. But I look at a guy like Russ Feingold, and I feel quite comfortable in saying, as the former senator from Wisconsin, not a corporatist, was a very much of a sincere institutionalist, would vote for Republican nominees as a matter of principle, because he was an institutionalist. And yet he is now the head of the American Constitution Society and seems to have an awareness of, like, you know what, we got played. And that seems to be what's happening with the voting rights. I mean, like, what, outline for us, let's say for a moment, you have the ability, Biden comes to you and says, you know what, Ari, I've seen you so many times on the Majority Report that I'm convinced. What should I do? What if we could pass something? What should we do?
I mean, basically, he needs to lock Manchin and Sinema in a room and say to them, do you want to be the two senators that allowed Jim Crow 2.0 to happen all across the country? That this isn't about Senate rules. It's about the fact that Republicans are trying to take voting rights back 100 years. We're going to lose our majorities because of it. We're going to have no ability to do anything for the next 2 years and beyond. We're probably going to lose power in 2022 and 2024 if that happens. And we have a very short window to act. And basically, you're allowing a Senate rule that's not actually in the Constitution anywhere to trump the ability to enforce all of the constitutional guarantees for voting rights that do exist in the Constitution. I think that's really the only option here, because everything else that Biden wants to do on voting rights is not going to be successful absent congressional legislation protecting the right to vote.
Okay, that's the how. That's the how you get the vote passed. But I'm asking, what does the bill look like? Like how do you defend against a 6-3 court? And it's different than a 5-4 court, right? Because in a 5-4 court, you always get that one, like, oh, Clarence Thomas, he needs the law written in Old English, and that's his thing. And therefore, I'm not voting for the. You always, with the 5-4, there was a 40% chance that one of these idiosyncratic conservatives would be on their own personal hobby horse, as the way that they brand themselves, and they would vote against it. But with 6-3, there's no margin for that at all. So how do you amend or reauthorize a Voting Rights Act when 10 years ago you had Scalia saying, like, I know they voted to reauthorize it, but they didn't really want to. It was just because they didn't want to look bad. In other words, they were pressured by the people, by democracy pressured them. So we're going to, alleviate them of that sort of burden. How do you write legislation when you have, I want to say it's a headwind, but it's not a headwind. It's like a meat grinder on the other end of it.
Well, I mean, theoretically, Congress has the authority to do both the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act under the authority they have, meaning that they have their ability to set the time, place, and manner for federal elections, meaning the rules for federal elections. So that would all fall under the For the People Act. And John Roberts explicitly said when he gutted the Voting Rights Act, Congress has the power to draft a new one, which is what they're doing. Now, how do you court-proof it? That's something that nobody knows, Sam. That's why I've been focused on what they have the power to do, which is change the Senate rules to pass these pieces of legislation, because that's something that they can actually control. They can have a simple majority vote tomorrow to pass these things. How do you court-proof it? You might not be able to. You honestly might not be able to court-proof it, and your only alternative is to expand the courts. If the courts are just going to strike down whatever you're going to do. That, to me, is a much more difficult conversation than how do you pass it. And right now, we're still at the how to pass it stage. And I absolutely don't believe that if the roles were reversed and Democrats were systematically trying to prevent Republicans from winning elections, that Republicans wouldn't hesitate for a second to use the power they have to change Senate rules to do this, because they've already changed the Senate rules. I mean, they already changed the Senate rules for the filibuster.
That's how they got this court. That's how.
Yeah, exactly. They got the court by changing the Senate rules. But Democrats won't change the Senate rules, which are completely arbitrary, by the way. The filibuster used to be what it used to be, 67 votes, and now it's 60 votes, and it could be 55 votes. I mean, like, there's no constitutional principle you're upholding here. And why are cabinet nominations 51 votes? Why are courts 51 votes? But other legislation isn't. Why can I cut taxes for the rich with 51 votes, but I can't protect the right to vote with 51 votes? There's no internal consistency to any of this stuff. So it's just crazy to me that we're still stuck on this. And I mean, just to talk about this speech that Biden is going to give in Philly today, I mean, it seems like he's not going to go there. It really seems like he's not going to go into, we have to change the filibuster to pass these bills. And I just don't see any other path of success. What you're going to register new voters and turn out new voters when the entire point of voter suppression is to make that harder to do? You're going to litigate your way through the courts when the courts have already said that they're not going to strike down any of these laws. I mean, the president and his team don't have any power to do anything short of trying to lobby Congress to do something. And that might not work. I wrote a piece today. I said very clearly, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, their minds might not be able to be changed, but try to change it. I mean, like, in the infrastructure bill, they had stuff that said, they said, we need this in the bill. If it's not in the bill, we're not going to support it. They haven't done anything like that on the filibuster. They haven't said, for example, I want this voting rights bill passed, and I'm willing to accept these changes to the filibuster. They've said that they don't even want to change the filibuster. So if your starting point is you don't want to change the filibuster, then you're not really using a lot of political capital to put pressure on senators to change the filibuster, right? And so my argument is they haven't actually even used any political capital in order to make this argument, because it's not entirely clear that they even believe that they should do it, right? Like, it's not even clear to me that they want to change the filibuster, or else he would have come out in favor of doing so.
What is it that they don't? I mean, Biden is giving the speech today because he has heard from civil rights leaders whose hair is on fire, essentially, over this. And is it that they don't? Is it that they don't take this voting stuff that seriously? Is it that the filibuster is so sacrosanct? Is it that Biden's feeling like, I need to get the infrastructure stuff in the bank first before I start to pressure Manchin on something else, right? Because it seems to me at one point you could have a situation where you float like, oh, we can have a reconciliation style resolution for voting rights. There can be like a special mechanism to pass democracy initiatives, right? I mean, this is all just gobbledygook, but it's all gobbledygook, right? Yeah. It's just to placate them. But that at this point, the White House, and this is complete conjecture on my part, the White House is sequencing it this way. We need to get the infrastructure bill. We need that legislation banked. Once we do that, then we can lean on Manchin and make a real show of it. And either he breaks or he doesn't. But at the very least, we get some type of, we stir up some politics about this on some level. It feels like right now he's just trying to sort of let the air out of the tire rather than drive somewhere.
But the problem with that is, number one, time is running out. to pass voting rights legislation, both because so much stuff has already been enacted in the states. Texas Democrats have a deadline of August 6th to have to go back there, or they're going to start another special session, and redistricting is happening in the fall, meaning that all of these states are going to redraw their maps. And if we don't have a ban on partisan gerrymandering for Congress, there are going to be crazy amounts of partisan gerrymandering going on. So they're running out of time. And also, if Biden passes an infrastructure bill with 65 votes, Joe Manchin's not going to feel any pressure to do anything about the filibuster, because he's going to say, what obstruction? We just passed this great bipartisan bill. We just built a bridge to nowhere in West Virginia. Why should I change the filibuster when I just got my bill passed? So I don't think that's ultimately going to be successful, but I do think that it's a combination of base placating, an internal debate within the administration about how big of a deal this is. Because I think if you polled 5 senior members of the administration, you're going to get different viewpoints of whether this voter suppression can be overcome and how it can be overcome. And the fact that they want to seem like they're getting credit for doing things without actually doing anything. And also, they don't want to have a fight over Senate rules that's going to then potentially jeopardize this bipartisan infrastructure package that Biden is so keen on doing. I mean, Biden's an institutionalist. I think he would much rather have 10 Republicans over at the White House for some chummy press conference than get into a fight over changing the Senate rules. That's never who he's been. But my point is, this is coming whether you like it or not, right? Like, you're either going to engage on the filibuster, or Republicans are going to take away your ability to be able to do anything legislatively and also to counteract the kind of suppression that we're seeing in the state. So it's coming one way or another. The question is, are you going to actually do something about it? And right now I'm seeing kind of a half-hearted effort. Maybe that'll change after the speech. Maybe I'll be blown away that he'll call for a voting rights exemption in the filibuster, and he'll call out Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, but I don't see it happening.
Emma, you have an update from the New York Times about Texas there.
Yeah. So essentially, a Texas Senate aide told someone at the New York Times, Nick Corsanti, that the number of Texas Democratic senators is not enough to break quorum in the Senate, which is not initially what reporting from the Texas Tribune, I believe, said. So it seems like they're going to take up Senate Bill 1 in Texas today.
Yeah, but I mean, they're not going to take it up in the House, so it's not going to pass. Yeah, I mean, they're going to pass it in the Senate and not going to pass it in the House. I guess they did the same thing with redistricting when the Texas Democrats fled the state in 2003. It passed one chamber and then passed another chamber. The point is, this is going to pass one way or another. It's either going to pass August 7th, or it's going to pass September 7th, or it's going to pass November 7th. This is going to pass. And the question is Congress going to do anything about it, right? Because Texas Democrats have said we can only run out the clock so much. I mean, we fled the state, we broke quorum, then we fled the state. I mean, we can't really do much more. Now, what could Congress do? They literally could hold a simple majority vote tomorrow to change the filibuster rules to pass the For the People Act. I mean, this is so much easier than what Texas Democrats are doing. And that's the frustrating thing to people, is that Texas Democrats are in the minority and they're going to these extraordinary lengths to protest voter suppression. Congressional Democrats are in the majority and they took 2 weeks off. They're back now. There's no sense of urgency to do anything about the voter suppression that Texas Democrats are protesting. That is the thing that is frustrating to people. They don't understand, why aren't Democrats using the power they have when Texas Republicans are using the power they have, which honestly pales in comparison to what Congress and the president can do.
In the course of your reporting, do you have any insight as to why there's such a lack of urgency? Like, why you don't have every 48 senators, dropping by Joe Manchin's office and Kyrsten Sinema's office? I mean, it feels like it's not, there are obstacles, obviously, but it feels like there is just simply a lack of will. And this just seems, is it just there is no cohesiveness with the Democrats, that there cannot be an existential threat to Democrats because there are no Democrats, in quotes? There's just like some individuals who, sign up under that ballot line, and different points there. I'm a Democrat in this instance, but not so much in that instance. I mean, what is it?
Well, what the White House basically says is there's not support for changing the filibuster. So we're not going to go there. And it's beyond Manchin and Sinema, that it's not like 2 senators holding out. It's 10 or 15. It's Mark Warner. It's other people. It's Dianne Feinstein. It's other people that like should be gettable, but have reluctance to do this because they're worried it will be used against them, which I guess is an understandable fear. My issue with the White House is then try to change their mind. Like if your position is we're not going to change the filibuster, then of course Joe Manchin's position is going to be we're not going to change the filibuster. But try to change his mind. Use some political capital trying to change his mind. Don't just lay out the stakes for what's wrong here. Lay out the stakes for what Congress can do about it. And basically, they had a vote on the For the People Act. It was filibustered by Republicans. Joe Biden didn't give a speech ahead of time, didn't do anything to lobby votes ahead of time. And then afterwards said he was disappointed, but didn't talk about Republicans using the filibuster to block it. So, I mean, like they're not using the political capital they have. Now, again, maybe there's nothing they can do, right? Maybe, as I said, Manchin and Sinema are ungettable. That's what happens when you have 50 Democrats in a Senate. You have, people that don't want to go along with the playbook. And so you get them where you can get them. And they're thinking, well, if I can get Manchin on infrastructure, but I can't get him on the filibuster, I'm going to prioritize infrastructure because that's gettable for us. And also it's broadly popular and I can go sell it around the country and everyone likes roads and bridges. I get the strategy, but if you believe this is an existential threat to democracy, that this is a foundational threat to a foundational right, then you have to act like it. Right. And that means that you don't just give one speech in Philadelphia and then say, hey, you guys sort it out. You offer a roadmap for how they should sort it out. And that to me has been the piece that's been missing here is, OK, if all of you guys support it, what are you going to try to do to actually pass it, especially because they've already filibustered it. So the obstruction has already been evident here.
I am old enough to remember May. And in May, we were told that Chuck Schumer was going to bring a series of very tough votes that were going to put pressure on Republicans, and they were all going to come in June.
It was
going to be a June-orama of votes, and they may have taken those votes. They took the For the People Act, but it is I can't quite understand if it is how anemic their attempts to even if I had to take the most cynical position ever, which is probably not necessarily inaccurate in some instances, that they don't want these things to pass anyways. They just want the political value out of Republicans scuttling them. They didn't even do that. Like they didn't even, like, where is the, I don't know, where are the events? Where's the publicity around those votes? It just seemed anemic to me.
Well, it's just crazy to me that Texas Democrats have to flee their state to persuade Democrats in Washington to do something. I mean, like, they shouldn't have to do this. They shouldn't have to flee their states, give up their salaries, risk arrest to convince Democrats to do something. Democrats should already be there. And so I think there just needs to be more sustained pressure, and the pressure has to stay sustained. And I think the Democrats showing up in Texas is going to be one pressure point. But I also think that the White House needs to do more. And we're going to see in the speech whether the White House is doing more. I don't think ultimately it's going to be enough. I think this has to be, if Joe Biden believes that this is a central cause of his presidency, a central cause of his life, he has to treat it as such.
What's the words that you would need to see in this speech that would let you believe that he is taking it seriously? The words filibuster?
I am calling on the Congress to pass voting rights legislation through any means necessary. If that means changing a Senate rule that is not actually in the Constitution to protect the most important constitutional right, then I believe that option should be on the table. And I'm bringing Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and Mark Warner and Dianne Feinstein to the White House tomorrow for a summit to figure out how to pass this legislation, because failure is not an option. That's what I would say in the speech.
There it is, ladies and gentlemen.
Also
Ron?
saying failure is not an option. Project some strength, Joe
Chuck
Biden.
Schumer already said failure is not an option, but failure has already become an option because they've already blocked the bill.
It's always an option
to
with
be
the Democratic
fair,
Party.
Chuck Schumer said it this way: failure is not an option.
Put your glasses down on your nose.
He did.
Yeah. There.
Ari, hopefully Ron Klain has watched your segment today and has inserted that into Joe Biden's speech, and then Manchin will feel the heat, and Sinema will also toe the line. But in the absence of that, we will talk again about the latest assault on voting rights by Republicans. Ari Melber, the author.
Ari Melber. Come on, you've known me for too long.
Whoa. Ari Berman. It's one of those days. Author of Give Us the Ballot, The Modern Struggle for Voting Rights in America. Sorry about that, Ari.
We love Ari Melber, though. All right, talk to you later.
We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. They used to both write at The Nation.
Yeah.
No music? All right, let's just come back. All right, we're back. I was just saying at the break that both Ari Berman and Ari Melber both wrote at The Nation back in the day. And we've been talking about the assault on voting rights so long that it brought me back to those days at The Nation. I wasn't there, but I mean, they were.
You felt like you were there.
Yep. Joe Biden will be giving that speech in Philadelphia. And again, it is the best I think that we can hope for is just that whatever the White House thinks that, it is time to get the infrastructure bill done. And then they'll focus on the whole making sure that people have the right to vote and maintaining, the ability for Democrats to win
B-side.
elections in the future. Exactly. If you're watching us on Peacock, we will see you tomorrow. There you go. The Chicago, according to Jonathan Armstead on the IM, the Chicago social worker strike ended this morning. Workers are getting an 8.5% pay increase, but will also pay more in health insurance. So that's a concession they gave up. Still at 18 days, that's the longest strike they'd ever done. So kudos. Well, thank you for that. Those are the SEIU folks in Cook County. And I'll tell you why I like the pay increase. Let me rephrase that. The in that type of situation, the pay increase and then also the more expense on the health insurance, unions need to sever their relationship with health insurance for there to be Medicare for all. We cannot have a situation where unions are also an obstacle. They're not the primary obstacle. I don't think they're even necessarily a secondary obstacle. But amongst the left, there needs, if there was full-throated desire by unions, and certainly in New York State, the unions inhibited New York State's push for Medicare for all. And part of that is because I think there is a fear in certain quarters in the union, in unions and union movement and unions as institutions, that their value add proposition is health insurance.
Well, it's also just the cudgel that they use in order, like often some union heads have relationships with Democratic leaders, and there's a bit of, we saw this in terms of just messaging from some Democratic politicians. They'll use union healthcare plans, which are better, as a way to fearmonger about, Medicare for all and health insurance, and it has a chilling effect.
Well, but they use that leverage because unions are there saying like, well, we don't want this value add.
Right.
We don't want this value add that we offer, this valuable proposition that we offer members that entices people to become union members. We don't want that to go away.
But the solution is stronger union protections, not, at the exclusion of healthcare push.
Right. All right. We're going to take a break, head into the fun half. 646-257-3920 is the number. 646-257-3920 is the number. Can't believe I said that, Ari. That was embarrassing. It's like somebody calling me Sam Stein, which happens all the time.
I think I got in your head a little bit.
Yeah.
With the roasting.
Exactly.
Yeah, I kind of.
Ari Berman. Folks, just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. When you become a member at the Majority Report,
Ari Bermanhoff.
Exactly. Now you got me. When you become a member of the show, you get the fun half, the free half free of commercials, and then you get the fun half every day. It is your membership that makes the show possible. Don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY, get 10% off. Also, check out our Discord, majoritydiscord.com, or our app at majorityapp.com. So many free
and Left
things.
Reckoning too, right?
Well, I was going to say, Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian media universe?
Yeah, last night for patrons, Griscom and I talked about Cuba, and also South Dakota's Attorney General, who was involved in a hit and run a few months ago where he said he assumed it was a deer. Turned out it was a guy that he hit, and his glasses were in his car from his head going through the windshield. Anyway, so watch some of that testimony. And also coming up on Wednesday, we have Victor Poggi. He's a journalist that was formerly with The Intercept in Brazil. We're going to be talking about Lula and Bolsonaro and some of his COVID vaccine scandals. So that's 8 Eastern on Wednesday now, the new night for Left Reckoning. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get all that bonus material.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report, and of course, Matt and Brendan. And somebody else is here.
Jesus.
Not quite yet. Just teasing it.
It's my parole officer.
Yes. Emma had her bracelet taken off her ankle, and now she's got.
I got a court-appointed.
Hey, folks, look. Folks over at Fox News, we all make mistakes. I just referred to Ari Berman as Ari Melber. It's a mistake that sometimes people make.
Ari Meister Burger?
Yeah, I don't know what that means, but...
You didn't watch Christmas movies?
No, I did.
Up,
I did
guess?
watch those.
Okay.
I did watch those. I mean, with tremendous disdain, of course.
It was such a good joke in the break that I felt I needed to repeat it.
That was back when I began my war on Christmas. But look, the point is, we all make mistakes. And just because you work for a news organization doesn't mean that you can keep all these different countries in Asia, separate and distinct from each other.
Especially when they're small countries, right? Like insignificant to somebody at a cable news.
Rarely in the news.
Right.
Who is this guy? Who's this Fox News reporter? We don't know who it is. Okay, let's play this clip. We're not sure what her name is, but this is on the Outnumbered show. And here are the Fox.
But it's Harris Faulkner saying it, right? Oh, it's
she agrees. Somebody else says it.
Okay, yeah, here it is. This is going to be. They are really. I mean, I appreciate the sentiment that maybe the Olympics should be canceled this year, but I wouldn't say it's because of this reason.
And around these Olympics, I like to call them the Genocide Olympics. Anyway, I'm still on the team that I'm not even sure that we should be competing because there is an ongoing genocide in Xinjiang. So if we are going to go to a country, if we are going to compete and have American athletes there in a country that's committing a genocide, even more important, Harris, to have the freedom of the American flag fully represented.
Wow. We got to play that again because there's a couple of things that you should be aware of. That Japan is not China. That's the first thing that you need to know. The Olympics are in Japan. The Uyghurs are being persecuted in China. There is some small quarters where that is a controversial statement, or at the very least that the question of genocide is a controversial statement.
Well, it's cultural genocide at the very least. Yeah.
But the one thing that is not controversial about that statement is that it's, to the extent that it's happening, and it very well may be, it's in China, not in Japan. Now, both those countries are in Asia, fair enough. And I don't know what else to say. What's impressive is that she's been saying this. She's been calling them the Genocide Olympics. And apparently no one ever in any other part of her life has said, what do you mean by that? Genocide Olympics. And then she would say, well, because of the Uyghurs. And they would say, like, well, you realize the Olympics are in Japan.
No, the producers were like, nailed it.
Let's play this clip again. Now, the other thing you should also watch during this clip is look at the faces of the other people on the show. They either can you imagine what the internal monologue is
down there?
They're not even blinking an eye at this. It's just like, oh yeah, she's talking about the Genocide Olympics. Whatever. Let's go.
Around these Olympics, I like to call them the Genocide Olympics anyway. I'm still on the team that I'm not even sure that we should be competing because there is an ongoing genocide in Xinjiang. So if we are going to go to a country, if we are going to compete and have American athletes there in a country that's committing a genocide, even more important, Harris, to have the freedom of the American flag fully represented.
That's impressive.
Oh, the freedom of the American flag. It's weird. You know, we should never do Olympics in countries that have committed genocide. So in LA, because of our genocide of the Native Americans, I'm sure that Fox News pundit is all on board for our getting rid of that.
I am just like, where's Xinjiang? It's like, I just like, I'm trying to figure out how it is that she knows the city. And this is not just a misspeaking. This is not, you know, like, oh, I'm sorry, I got your name wrong. I confused it with the other Ari.
She's incorporated this into an argument.
Yeah. She's really thought about this. She's like bringing up data that like.
I'm on the team. Like, who else is on that team that's been calling this the Genocide Olympics? Because I haven't heard from them.
That's what I've been calling it.
Oh, no, but she's been cooking it up, right? She's like, she wants to have her own kind of war on Christmas moment or critical race theory thing where I'm going to move up on this Fox News ladder. I have got some angle here.
YouTube clips. But not for that reason. Damn it. That is really, really unbelievable.
Look, I'm all for, also just to address China, like I'm all for people having a more expansive definition of genocide and like a greater appreciation of what cultural genocide looks like. I think when those same people are doing all they can to obfuscate what's going on in Canada with regards to residential schools right now, they should maybe not be the speakers of what cultural genocide is.
Oh no, I'm sure though she waited on that.
And they are apparently mad about the flag redesigned. The U.S. Olympic Committee is redesigning their flag, and so that is what brought. She's like, oh well, we're doing. What am I going to do for my angle on the? I'm upset about the Olympic flag. Oh, I know. Accuse Japan of genocide.
And I mean, oh, well, we got this here.
U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, they're considering redesigning the American flag. They say that they're in the early stages. They're brainstorming different flags just to make everyone feel included and, you know, make everyone feel happy.
So the one on the left is what they use right now, and it only has 13 stars because they said about 10 or 15 years ago when they redesigned it, too hard to have all 50 on a little emblem the size of a cookie. So, but that particular version is an official U.S. flag. So the one on screen right is what they're thinking about doing, where you've got 5 stars and you've got, what, 3-4 stripes. Red stripes.
They're saying the 5 stars represent things like inclusion.
No. This is dumb. As a matter of fact, why isn't the original flag on there? And it's a load of BS that they continue to say that it can't fit on a cookie. We went and looked at the helmets in our executive producer's office, and they all have the original flag on there with 50 states on there. Why isn't that the flag that has been included on there? This is another attempt, and I get it. People have the freedom to speak what they want to speak, but at least you would think the country would advocate for our original flag.
Well, see if this makes sense to you, because this is a statement from the Olympic Committee to Fox News. They say, it is common practice in creative development.
Stop. Can we,
this is for babies.
This is just honestly like, but here's the amazing thing. We've just done some research, and have we double checked this? Because I certainly don't want to misstate something in a segment that is mocking mercilessly how Fox misstated this. But apparently, the commentator who claimed that she calls this the Genocide Olympics is Morgan Ortagus. And she is a former State Department spokesperson for Trump. Now, I say that like in that way because the State Department,
best people.
Oh, they're not responsible for knowing the difference between Japan and China. Whatever.
It's like we said at the top of the show: accuracy over precision. Okay?
The bottom line is she's an expert on the Atlantic Council.
I don't even want to give her this.
Well, to be fair, She's an expert on the Atlantic Council, not the Pacific Council.
Yeah.
So
I don't even want to give her but the Winter Olympics is happening in China, right?
I don't know.
Next year?
I don't know. Maybe she just got summer and winter.
It's less fun, but maybe she just, she got too excited about her 2022 talking point and it.
Unbelievable. Wow. That is impressive.
I like all this cross partisan support for getting rid of the Olympics, though.
Yes,
that's pretty
totally.
cool. Liberate track and field from these monsters.
What should we do here? Should we do Dave Rubin with?
Oh my God, yeah.
Should we do? Which one? Are they both?
Africa.
Are they both with?
There's two.
Oh, there's more than two, right? There's okay. Let's do the. All right. So here is Dave Rubin. Like, Dave Rubin must get the talking points like delayed, right? Because what Dave doesn't seem to understand is that we are past the COVID denial. We're into the we're into the vaccine denial, sort of, right? Or aren't we into the Delta variant denial? Here is Dave Rubin with some deep thoughts about COVID.
He's just throwing things out there.
Yeah.
None of it makes sense. Why is it that not one country, somewhere perhaps in Africa, that didn't have the technology or the wherewithal or the information to deal with this thing properly, why did not one country fail? Why didn't we find one city that was completely infected and everyone died? All of this stuff. Like, I'm just asking questions here, okay? I don't mean to be a crazy right-wing conspiracy theorist when I say all this. I'm just asking the questions, but we didn't.
Mean to be.
Dave Rubin, like, you can find like 7-8 months ago, he was literally doing these live streams where he'd be walking past the hospital and be like, "Ooh, look, doesn't that hospital's parking lot look suspiciously empty
Yes.
for the
Yeah.
middle of a pandemic?" Like, he is just an idiot conspiracy theorist.
But
Yes.
it's almost like, Dave, COVID doesn't have an 100% death rate.
Well, that's one of the things about COVID is it does not have a 100% death rate. There's also, the fact of the matter is that there's just not as much, the travel between cities, not as extensive. But the idea that everybody would die, and frankly, one of the things that we're seeing is in this country, he doesn't have to travel all the way to Africa to find this out, is that, like, you look at what's happening in states like, what is it, like Mississippi and Tennessee.
Take what happened in India.
Well, in India, but I'm saying right now in this country, you're watching states that are, vaccination rates below 40% are having massive explosions of COVID. And Missouri, Arkansas, and it's not happening in other parts of the country. It's conceivable, and part of the reason why we want to be able to get the vaccine to places like the continent of Africa, the city in Africa.
The city of Africa.
City of Africa.
Right.
Is because ultimately the variants and the COVID will ultimately end up there. And it's conceivable that the folks are wearing masks and you're in less dense areas, and maybe it's but at one point it could be a problem.
He's really speaking for the type of idiot that listens to Rubin every day, that wonders like, oh, we're the greatest country in the world. They're so on the like American exceptionalism thing that's an actual interesting question for them.
Right. In terms of like practices, pre-vaccination, they actually have the wherewithal in these countries to.
Africa's dealt with some public health issues.
Occasionally, it's happened. Yeah.
It's amazing to me, though, that he has a subscriber base, and there are people that are like, I need to pay for that kind of content.
I mean, on some level, you do need to pay. If you want to bathe yourself in that type of ignorance, you need to.
Well, you pay in more ways than one.
You need to stake out a certain area and stay there, because otherwise, if you go out, somebody's going to say, "Hey, why do you keep calling it the Genocide Olympics?" At the same time, let's tune into another outlet of right-wing conspiracy, and that is Newsmax. And they sort of have it's sort of like it's almost like the alt take on that same sort of like, they pivot off the same point, but it's the alt take. Here is Rob Finnerty and Dr. Peter McCullough.
Oh, now he's unimpeachable.
You know, one thing I've always thought, and maybe you can guide me on this because obviously I'm not a doctor, but when I've always thought about vaccines, and I always think about just nature and the way everything works. And I feel like a vaccination in a weird way is just generally kind of going against nature. Like, I mean, if there is some disease out there, maybe there's just an ebb and flow to life where something's supposed to wipe out a certain amount of people, and that's just kind of the way evolution goes. Vaccines kind of stand in the way of that. Do you follow what I'm saying? Does that make sense to somebody in medicine?
Yes, you're a sociopath.
Well, there are some reports that support what you're saying. There's one by Neeson and colleagues from Boston and the Mayo Clinic that shows among vaccinated populations, the diversity of different strains is narrowing. So it's going to be fewer numbers of strains. Right now in the United States, we're about 40% UK variant or the Alpha variant, and we're about 30% now Delta, which is the Indian variant. They get progressively weaker, but the diversity is changing with vaccination. And I think probably the best way to think about it is vaccines really ought to be targeted to protect the highest risk individuals. A young person like you, if you got COVID, it's very easily treatable. You get through it. And natural immunity for sure is superior.
Yeah, you know, that's you make a good point there. Again, it's like if you've got this big risk, I think it might be worth whatever it is. But if you don't have a risk, I can't comprehend why you would take something. They start learning about the heart inflammation and stuff like that. I just don't understand why it's being pushed so hard on people that are very young, and now they're trying to give it to kids. You saw today, you know, the CDC saying that going back to school in the fall, it looks like if your kid's not vaccinated, they're going to have to wear a mask next year. What are your thoughts on that?
All right, wait a second. Wait. Okay. We got to start at the beginning here.
Okay.
First off, the beauty is that the guest, who's also, I think, somewhat of a lunatic himself, completely ignores the host's sheer lunacy. Just to be clear, if what this guy says is actually his belief system, that vaccines are standing in the way of nature's regeneration. Like, you know, a forest catches on fire, it wipes it out, and then stuff grows back. That's what he's sort of arguing. Like, this is the natural way we call the herd. I hope this dude's not taking things like antibiotics.
I hope this dude never gets cancer, because chemotherapy, that's an affront against nature, my friend.
Yeah, this argument on vaccines was popular in like 1750. And yeah, also the idea that immunity isn't natural. Like immunity, we're just being conscious about, you know, immunity.
Developing
exactly.
immunity.
Yeah.
And like also, America wouldn't have like existed in this way it does without immunity.
Do you know? Yeah, I mean, forget all the vaccine, polio, and all this. But you know what else seems unnatural to me? Inspecting your meat. Like, why would you? Like, you're standing in the way of nature's way of saying, this person, or any of your foods for that matter. In fact, isn't sort of having like a society where other people manufacture or grow your food, isn't that also sort of standing in the way of nature?
Why isn't Rob Finnerty just, you know, hunting for his meals?
Exactly. Let's nature take over. And this whole thing where we're like imprisoning like animals or, you know, like keeping them out of like where's the wild boar that will go and sort of impale this guy when he walks out of the studio?
Yeah, I mean, Newsmax is conservative media for people who are conscious about their population control agenda.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back to the social Darwinism there. I love the guy as, you know, between those two ship paintings, because if you're an old conservative white man, you're only allowed to have paintings of ships and horses. That's it. That's it.
all you're allowed. And we're going to put all the ships. We call that ship corner.
Right.
That's at the house.
And you have to stand 10 feet from your Zoom camera to explain why vaccines are unnatural.
The doctor
guy for it.
ignores the question.
Yeah.
And says, well, actually what's happening is that the variants are narrowing, and that is, of course, a function of we have taken the numbers of people who are susceptible to a serious COVID infection. We've taken that number down dramatically in this country. So the opportunity for variants is much less. And just the idea, and then at one point the host comes back at the end and he's like, okay, put aside the fact that I think that vaccines are an inhibition of the natural cycle of life where people are culled. Can you believe this now? They're saying that if kids don't get vaccinated, they got to wear masks. Masks also.
Unnatural.
An inhibition of... What's weird is this dude's wearing clothes.
I was just about to say, right? I mean, does he live in a house?
Yeah. Why?
Yeah.
I'm just reminded of the Ambrose Bierce definition of air, which is a nutritious substance supplied by a bountiful providence for the fattening of the poor. And I feel like this is the way he looks at this stuff. Like, too many of these people, we could be free of a lot of these excess feeders if we just let the virus do its job.
Oh my God, he probably wants, if you're a child with, some sort of disability, naturally, time to die. That's the way this kind of guy thinks.
That's impressive. And one day there'll be a crossover episode between that guy and Dave Rubin, and we'll all enjoy it. Oh, speaking of crossover, let's, you know who Dave Rubin had on his show? MLK scholar, Kevin McCarthy.
Ah.
Yeah. Kevin McCarthy, of course, is the minority leader in the House.
Oh, we're back to that. We're back to this bastardizing of MLK's legacy, right?
Minority
leader.
Minority leader. Yeah, minority leader.
He gets minorities.
He gets it.
The minorities wouldn't let him do that if he didn't know what he's talking about.
Minorities made him their leader. So, okay. I rest my case. Here is... MLK would have been against teaching kids critical race theory. Well, part of the reason is, of course, because it's a law school level class. But we shouldn't. MLK was really big about age-appropriate learning.
Let's teach them the fundamentals first.
It's going to be big, right? Because all of these things about defunding the police, they're all these Democrat policies that are now going in place, we're seeing the outcome, the wokeism, the open border, the inflation. Where we're going to have the biggest victory? School boards. We haven't been paying attention for the last 20 years. Critical race theory goes against everything Martin Luther King has ever told us. Don't judge us by the color of our skin. And now they're embracing it, right? They're going backwards. And the interesting part here is, okay, something else is happening, not just an election, and it'll be a national election for Congress. What history says is the party in power, whoever wins the White House on the first off-year election loses 27 seats. We lost 40, Obama lost 63. So and they have a 5-seat advantage.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There's the Rubin report. Rubin, of course, asking the tough questions there. MLK, totally against critical race theories, of course.
This is the long-standing conservative tradition, though, of completely,
bastardizing,
whitewashing. I mean, we talked about Reagan earlier in the show, and his project of trying to gut the Voting Rights Act, while simultaneously, I bring this up every time, being the president that enshrined Martin Luther King Day as a national holiday, which had an effect that essentially completely whitewashed how difficult and how messy and how just intense that kind of activism was, and what was needed in terms of fortitude, and that's by design. And so then McCarthy continuing in that legacy. He's just also so bad at this compared to Mitch McConnell. That's my other takeaway from this.
I got a
Bit of a
MLK
beta.
quote here. Whites, it must frankly be said, are not putting in a similar mass effort to re-educate themselves out of their racial ignorance. It is an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people of America believe they have so little to learn.
You're trying to, am I supposed to believe that that was Martin Luther King? He never said the words white or black.
Yeah, he never talked about race. Everyone's the same color.
Do you think if MLK was still alive, black people would be a little bit nicer and more understanding of white people?
A little bit more obsequious.
I can't believe the way they're bastardizing his thinking. He would never treat critical race theories or trigonometry to elementary school kids. I mean, this is, they are in a completely self-contained bubble now, and that's the scary part about this. It used to be that this stuff would travel, and they would need it to travel outside of these, you know, it was talk radio at the time, or right-wing, you know, small publications, and it would travel to Drudge or Fox, and then vice versa, Fox or Drudge, and then some producer at ABC would pick it up, and then it would all get mainstreamed and this and that. I mean, there was a great thread on the Ilhan Omar scandal from I don't know, a couple weeks ago or something.
Right.
That somebody did it, and maybe we'll talk about this in the coming days. The stuff gets out there, and then it gets exacerbated sometimes by Democrats. That dynamic, literally Democrats, I'm talking elected officials, exacerbated the Ilhan Omar controversy. But I know this from my own experience that with MSNBC, the initial concern was more a function of the fact that Donald Trump Jr. and Sepp Gorka retweeted Cernovich. And there is this sort of like you could take the perspective of like, who cares? They have no legitimacy with a significant portion of the country, A, and B, they're wrong. But that dynamic is largely irrelevant now, for the most part. Obviously, when your own elected colleagues start to criticize you, it's going to have a little more traction than it otherwise would. But this stuff, it doesn't have to travel anywhere except for in these circles, because they're just talking to their own audience now.
But but it will, though, because he literally just said it right there. School boards. That's what they're doing.
Yes,
this
exactly.
is a grassroots level project. They want to galvanize and energize a base of Trump voters in a new way, and the best way to get them involved in local politics, and then of course that bubbles up to the national level, is to drum up this culture war nonsense and say your kids are being indoctrinated. The kids are being indoctrinated, and they found a way to actualize it in in an actionable way.
Yep. Is there a problem with my audio? That's weird. All right, let's go to the phones. Calling from a 304 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Hello? Are you on the other line?
Is there a problem with my audio?
No, there is not a problem. 304. 304.
Let's go to the phone.
Oh, hey, is that me?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
All right, awesome. One sec, let me get inside really quick. So there are two things that I wanted to talk to you about.
Okay.
Who is this?
First is my anti-vaxxer family.
Wait, what is it? What is your name and where are you calling from?
Oh, so sorry. My name is Ren, and I'm from West Virginia.
From where?
West Virginia.
West Virginia, okay.
Industrially ravaged heartland of farming and dying of all the crap that comes from coal mining.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about how to persuade my 87-year-old great-grandmother to get vaccinated, so I don't have to have her die while I'm on the phone with her, and I can't even see her in person.
Horrible. I don't know how you do that. Why would she be worried about getting vaccinated?
She just, she thinks that she's going to have an adverse reaction to it or something, and she's like, oh, well, I don't have people come visit me very often anyway. I mean, my parents, it gets me so freaking upset. My parents are having my sister go on a trip with my dad to Cabo, Mexico, which is a freaking massive hotspot for the Delta variant. She's 15, she's a track and field runner, and they won't get her vaccinated because they think it's going to affect her fertility.
Oh, jeez.
And, you know, I just don't know how to handle it. It makes me feel like I'm going crazy because we just live in alternate realities. And I don't know, all this crap with the culture war over COVID has really just freaking driven a wedge in my family.
I don't know what I don't know what to I don't know what to say. I really don't know what to. I mean, I have dealt with on some level. I have dealt with some of this in my very, very extended, family. But and we basically said, yeah, I mean, it's not analogous. I mean, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
are they kind of just going, we need more information before we get it, which is often just a placeholder for not getting it? I've dealt with some of that. Yeah.
They've said that, it's only been out a year. Here's the thing. My mom and dad are vaccinated. So I think part of it is they're actually worried about it impacting her fertility. They didn't care about my fertility, I guess, because I'm trans. So, that's no big deal. But it's like, I don't know. It's a whole thing where I'm debating if it's ethical or not to, cut contact, to try to, pressure in some way to,
I mean, I think it's perfectly...
And I feel like that's an awful thing to do.
I just don't know if it's effective. I mean, put aside the ethical or not. I think that's
it's fine ethical if you feel that that's what you need to do for you and your family. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
But if it's about efficacy, look, statistically speaking, I mean, I don't know what the odds are of that 15-year-old catching something in Cabo or traveling or whatnot. It's it's conceivable.
I'm worried it's going to impact her maximum lung capacity, or that she's going to have some long-term damage from this.
Well, but here's the thing. Your cutting off contact is probably not going to change whether they get a vaccination for her. And it's probably more likely that they won't, because once your voice has stopped reminding them hey, you should do this, or, in 3 or 4 months, hopefully she's still not contracted COVID, and you can say it's been 3 or 4 more months. As far as grandma, it's I mean,
it's she's lived through all this crap. She survived having her aorta fail at 84 and going through heart surgery and all this crap. And I mean, COVID is one thing, but with Delta variant, if she's gone. She is straight up gone.
Yeah. I mean, I think you just got to hang in there and
yeah.
Hope that you can influence them on some level.
Yeah,
and
try to influence behavior, distancing if you do go see her, or tell people to get tests or something like that. But I feel the same way. I have family members who I'm just not going to get through to, and or persuade, I guess. I'll get through to them, but I think of myself as more like a Greek chorus, where you're basically commenting on the action, but you're secondary. And the idea is maybe at some point they'll be hey, what was this Greek chorus telling me this whole time? It seemed to be right. But with older people, it's tough because you might not get that chance.
Yeah. There's one more thing that I'd like to talk to you about, if that's okay.
Sure.
If I'm not taking up too much time. I hope that I'm not added to the list of libertarians owned by Sam Seder, but I'd really like to talk about social libertarianism, because I think that a lot of people in leftist circles don't understand that libertarians can also be leftists.
I am suspicious of that premise, at least in the context of, I mean, like, I guess it really just comes down to like how are you defining that? Like, I mean, we've had this has come up on the show. Like, I think you can be a civil libertarian and be a leftist. To you know, at least to some degree. But that, at least in the context of American libertarianism, it really is about economics is the primary driver of it. And I mean, but go ahead, make your case.
Then maybe you'd call me a civil libertarian. Then it's like I think that government is important. That government protects the rights of the people and that it prevents exploitation, and that's why we need the government here. But the government isn't doing that, and the government is like constantly infringing upon our civil liberties with, you know, the surveillance state and all of this other crap where government is, you know, going into your life and violating your basic rights to privacy and everything else. And, you know, it's like, I think that, you know, the idea of like libertarian anarchism or, you know, just full on capitalism would not work, because then it just turns into feudalism. You know, whoever has enough money to hire people with guns, well, they're the king now. Everyone else is subservient to them. You know, you don't need permission to build a road if there's no regulatory body saying you can't build a road through a neighborhood where people don't consent to that. And, you know, it all falls apart, and then you've got a bunch of people warring with each other, and it's just feudalism. But what I think could be productive is like applying certain aspects of like libertarian ideology or philosophy to our government. You know, so like instead of public housing, which we have right now, where people will wait in lines for, you know, 6, 8, 10 years to get access to housing, how about we just subsidize the individual person by paying a portion of their rent if they fall below a certain income level, you know, get rid of our assets in public housing, and then, you know, get to fire a bunch of people in government positions that aren't doing much.
We do that. We do certainly some subsidizing of rent, without a doubt, as opposed to building public housing.
Yeah, I just think.
I mean, I
just think the idea of. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, look, what you're describing is I mean, I don't believe that government can't function poorly. I mean, it definitely can, like any institution, right? Like you know, a car can function poorly. I'm not against cars. I need to get a better car. I need to make the car better. I mean, I think that's inevitable. I mean, so I don't disagree with anything you were saying in terms of like, I don't think we should have a surveillance state. I think we should have more protections on our privacy, without a doubt. And we've had, you know, there's always been an ebb and flow in terms of restricting our government. But I mean, look, if it's not going to be the government, it's going to be some type of private actors who are going to do the same exact thing. Probably are to some extent. And theoretically, at least, we have the opportunity to control what our government does, theoretically. Yeah. It's like, I think that, and, you know, I think that with climate change, it's an existential threat. And at this point, we're at a place, and we have been for a bit, where government is the only thing that really can rectify the issue of climate change or try to do anything about it. But I really feel like government has been a large part of the issue with why climate change has gotten to this point of subsidizing all these oil and gas companies that weren't profitable for 15 years. You know? Yeah.
I mean, I would just say my issue, because I do a similar thing, which is that I'm fine with the label democratic socialist. One of the problems people have with that, though, is it implies authoritarian socialism, and so does libertarian socialist. And I guess my thing is like, I don't think it's helpful to think of these things as libertarian particularly in the context of America, because I think the real problem is the foreclosure of democracy right now. Like I think
Okay.
the debates about whether the government is going to participate in the economy are over. That's basically passed, except for some libertarians that call in and work at the Ayn Rand Institute. But like democracy is being rolled up, so I like emphasizing that. But I do take the critiques of like, well, are you implying that the rest of socialism isn't democratic? I understand that, but I just that's my concern with libertarian socialism, because I don't think it's really fruitful to lead to a libertarian ideology, particularly because I don't think the libertarian socialist tradition is that developed. Like I think Orwell should qualify as like a very staunch critic of Stalin, but I don't know that libertarian socialists even consider him a libertarian socialist. So
you would argue that the term libertarian has been taken down such, a far-right anarcho-capitalist, kind of path.
Yeah,
that
I think
the whole term is kind of a loss.
Yeah, and I think the only way to remedy that would be to like reintroduce a canon of libertarian socialists, and I'm not even sure who that is. But I think that's the work libertarian socialists have to do before, because I think that term is it's motivated reason of oligarchy is what libertarianism means here.
Appreciate the call. Good luck with the family.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful day, Sam.
You too. Bye-bye.
Everyone else. Bye.
She was sweet.
Calling from a 850 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's Cody from Tallahassee.
Cody from Tallahassee. What's on your mind?
Well, I was going to wait until, it was a day that Emma wasn't there, because I'm a men's rights activist. But she's here. You guys answered my call. I'm completely kidding. Sorry, Emma.
I was going to say, it's as if like my phone dialed in on this day and I just like put it up. But.
I'm a libertarian men's rights activist. No,
You're a little
I
hot
did
on
follow,
Cody, just back off your phone just a little bit.
I didn't follow the instructions, and I'm on speaker. 1 sec, walking around.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, typical.
Sounds better now.
Okay, is that a little better?
Yeah, you're better. What's up, Cody?
I went down the rabbit hole of men's rights activism just because I consider myself a feminist as well, married one, wanted to see what it was all about. And there were two things, both of which the guy that called in did not bring up, that I would consider kind of a viable, I guess, goal to work towards as far as men's rights are concerned. One of which was the disparity in prison sentencing, but that's kind of the prison system as a whole needs to go regardless. I'm not worried about equality in sentencing. I want less sentencing, period. So that one kind of was a wash as well. But there was one that stood out. The one thing I could find that actually made sense to worry about and bring up and try and, I don't know, maybe push society in a way that that doesn't consider it normal, and that is circumcision. So medical decisions, non-consensual medical decisions made for what I guess could be elective surgery, right? Just because, in some cases, the last conversation I had with my family on it boiled down to like, mommy didn't want, your wee-wee to look weird. And that was the basis of the entire decision for a process that could have caused permanent damage. It's just,
How
that was
old
the one
were
thing I
you
could
when
think.
your mommy called it a wee-wee?
This was 37.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
she didn't have the, she didn't.
Penis? All right.
Can I interject? and
No,
just
it was in
ask?
front of grandma.
Can I
So-
interject and just ask? I mean, were any of these critiques about these two critiques? Men's rights activists, I would imagine, there's a huge crossover with like right wingers, obviously. So like, is there any
Completely.
critique of systemic racism, which is the driving factor of mass incarceration, or like, are any of these discussions about
that's the whole,
circumcision tinged with anti-Semitism? Because that's some of what I've seen too.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's been painted as a whole, which is why I wanted to go and kind of see if there was anything that stood out that would be, worth, I guess, going after the societal norms to try and fight for equality. Because it turned it around on who asked the question, and it came up because my, mother asked if I regretted her making that decision. And, you know, I asked if I had a daughter and decided I didn't want her vagina to look weird. How would you feel about that? You know, have a doctor do an elective surgery for that, you know, but the shoes reversed. The look on her face definitely gave the answer, which was, you know, she was mortified.
Right. I mean, look,
Yeah,
I think that there is a legitimate conversation about circumcision in this in our society. It's a male phenomenon as opposed to, you know, other societies where it can be a female. And and as you know, my son was circumcised. I was circumcised. It was in the context of a Jewish ceremony.
Yeah,
and
I mean, there's no loyal involved in mine. You know, it was purely elective.
I to be honest with you, like beyond the sort of emotional attachment and tradition, and the assurance, like in my not having any recollection of it being a problem for me,
Right.
and you know, being assured by our Moyle, who was also a pediatrician, I should say, that
There you go.
it was not going to be painful for the child. We used, you know, local anesthesia. I can't justify it on a rational basis. I can't.
Right.
I mean,
and that was what it was. Yeah. Looking at all of it, that was the one thing that stood out that I couldn't, you know, wrap my head around and justify.
Yeah, and I also don't think that's a men's rights issue, frankly. I mean, I'm not sure what the right is here that is unique to
The right to
there
a
are
foreskin.
there are what's called like
Right.
intactivists who would reject a right-wing label. I know some. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the debate is illegitimate itself, and like I say, I don't think I can defend it on a rational basis. But I still don't think that there's
Right.
an intrinsic gendered rights issue there. Although I guess it only happens to men in our society. You know, from a cosmetic standpoint, there are other cosmetic surgeries that are elective that parents make for their children. You know, decisions that they make on their children that are maybe like, you know,
involved
more.
in like a deformity, though, right? Like it's something that's not normal, I guess, with those.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
my looking at it.
Right. But
Yeah.
again, it's a subjective call, right? Like, I mean, it's still a subjective call. You could make an argument, and I'm not saying it's as subjective. It's still a subjective call. I just don't think that's a rights issue. I mean, first of all,
And
it's
that's what I think the
it's not
problem
a
with the name
men's rights issue. It
Right.
is a child's rights issue. And the reason why I want to be specific about that anyways is that we have a society that is structured in a certain way, and certain people in our society have consistently lost, broadly speaking, because of the structure of that society. There's no doubt in my mind that there are a couple of areas where men, because they're men, get shortchanged in narrow circumstances.
Right.
And there are definitely biases that are unhelpful. Those biases, incidentally, are more foundational to the patriarchy. In other words, like, if they're, then they are any other system. And there is definitely a price for men to pay in a patriarchal society, without a doubt. And
Right.
part
But it's
of
not a
the
rights
reason-
thing.
It's
You know,
not.
yeah.
It's not. It's simply not a rights thing. I mean, rights. You know, like it's not. And you know, like in the context of divorce law, like there's, you know, in New York State, for instance, doesn't recognize 50-50 custody.
Custody, right? Yeah. and
In
assets.
terms of like child support, it looks at who makes the most money between the two parents. Now, and it's a weird system in the way that you actually pay out this child support. However, it is not a men's rights issue only to the extent that men still end up making more money than women more often than not, and so they end up having to the full burden of child support. But that's a function of another problem in society.
Right.
I mean,
the only other one I could find societal problem-wise was the open discussion of mental illness, anxiety, things like that. The idea that you can't show vulnerability in a lot of, in workplaces, in friend groups, things like that. And I mean, you can. It's just not, societally
No, you
acceptable
can't
at this
because
point.
of right. I mean, and that's but the flip side of that too, which is like yes, that
it's not right.
It's one. I don't want to come off as flippant about the circumcision conversation because I think
not at all.
it's something to it's something to be
Flippin'
had.
Foreskin's a great band name though.
Yeah, honestly, that you're absolutely right. But the flip side of men not being able to show their emotions in a certain context is that women have to control their emotions in every context, professionally or in terms.
Well, you don't want to be hysterical.
You don't want to be hysterical, but you also want to be
you don't want to come off as hysterical.
You don't want to be a bitch, but you also don't want to get rolled over. You don't want to look, whatever. There's so if men have to, try to control their emotions in that one particular context, for every one of those examples, there's about 10 to 15 others for women. So
completely agree.
Yeah.
All right. Well, appreciate the phone call.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
And I should say specifically even more so for women of color.
I don't know. Meghan McCain saying she's a Zionist.
Oh, well, I was like, we skipped. I know. I don't think it's in sound today. I meant to send it, but how Trump is now saying that a Democratic operative helped or killed Ashley Babbitt.
Oh, we do have that. She's an incredible.
Do you mind if you don't mind talking about that?
Do we have it?
It's pretty insane.
It's not clip number 4, right? It's a different one. Okay,
I think I copy and pasted the wrong one.
It's fascinating. What they're doing with Ashley Babbitt. She's the woman who was climbing through the broken window of the door into the main chamber of where the congressional offices were. There was a cop who was behind the barricaded doors yelling, "Don't come in, don't come in, don't come in." You could see it with the video. It was quite explicit on what happened.
And there was a gun that was pointed out.
And there was a gun pointed at her. And as she jumped through, he fired. I mean, I don't know if that was a justified firing, to be honest with you. I don't know why you don't fire up in the air once. The guy was terrified, I have no doubt. Scary situation. But it's quite clear what happened there, right? I mean, there was an assault on the Capitol. And I don't know how, these people are like, we're busting through these doors, but we don't mean a threat to anybody.
And they're comparing it to George Floyd, who was accused of using a counterfeit bill, was completely subdued, and then slowly murdered over 9 minutes while she was charging through broken glass.
And to be clear, she wasn't alone.
Yeah,
there were
it was a mob.
Hundreds, if not a couple of thousands of people, as opposed to Floyd. So it's not analogous. But what's interesting is they are now making her some type of martyr. And what's also interesting is that they're doing this months later when there is distance between the right-wing talking points of cops are right in all circumstances. Mm-hmm. And now there's some distance, right? And so now they can afford to do that. Here's Donald Trump both lionizing her and implying that the Dems took her out.
Well, that's right. And I want to talk about that because Ashley Babbitt, a wonderful woman, fatally shot on January 6th as she tried to climb out of a broken window.
Whoa. She wasn't trying to climb out of a broken window. She was trying to climb in through a broken window.
Which was broken by members of the mob that she was a part of. And again, it's a tragedy that she died. It's a tragedy that she was brainwashed to the point that she was doing this. That's the tragedy.
Yeah, that's the point is, like, the people who pulled the trigger are the people who said the election was stolen, because stolen elections justify a certain amount of resistance. Now, I think those people are, like, completely misled, but they were misled by Republicans. And, like, that's who she's. If she's a martyr to anyone, she's a martyr to GOP propaganda.
Yeah, the
elections.
GOP gave this cop the gun, put his finger on the trigger, and then put pressure on it, and now they're trying to hold like some sort of funeral for the person.
But you also know that they're lying when they have to say she's trying to climb out of a window. Climb out.
Yeah,
she wasn't climb out
lie
anywhere.
there by her too.
Yeah, the people that think they're coming to her defense and pretending that she was there on some sort of tour are just absolutely despicable.
But continue.
All right, yeah, start it over again.
Wonderful woman fatally shot on January 6th as she tried to climb out of a broken window. Her family has spoken out. Her family has been on Tucker Carlson, and they want answers as far as why this wonderful woman, young woman who went to peaceful protest, was shot. Do you have any information? There is speculation that this was a security detail in a leading member of Congress's security detail, a Democrat. What can you tell us in terms of who shot Ashley Babbitt? What do you know, Mr. President?
So I've heard that. I will tell you they know who shot Ashley Babbitt. They're protecting that person. I've heard also that it was the head of security for a certain high official, a Democrat. And we'll see, because it's going to come out. It's going to come out.
It was the same head of security
we need to pull the other video.
That killed Seth Rich.
We need to pull the other video.
Yeah.
Let's this idea that she was shot climbing out of a window. Like it is amazing how, I mean, I just presumed everybody saw this. Do you have it?
It's going to take a while.
They smashed the windows. There is intense chaos. She is trying to breach the inner area of where I would imagine maybe it was, I don't know if it was Pelosi or other high-ranking or even just Congress people. But yes, this guy was on a security detail without a doubt. That's exactly why he fired, because they were breaching through the door. It wasn't a window, incidentally. It was a glass part of a door.
What would Trump say? Trump was in the White House and this mob of thousands of people came and were breaking the glass and trying to get to him, and one of his Secret Service officers shot one of them. This is the equivalent of that. But apparently, obviously, the lawmakers aren't worthy of the same protection that he is. So you
Let's
have the
play
video,
this.
yeah.
It's just, hold on. We should also say this is a little disturbing.
Yes, warning.
This has a warning on it right here. It's freezing.
So obviously, though, they're...
The other side, right over there, right in the left-hand corner of the thing. You can see the gun, actually, I think it is. The left-hand corner of this other window that is smashed. You can see right in front of the door here are desks and chairs that are piled up to keep this door from being opened, because there are Congress people in the other side who are running in fear from
So we
this
shouldn't
mob.
even call it a window. It's the window of a barricaded door with
Exactly.
cops pointing guns on the
Exactly.
other end of it.
Yeah, go ahead. And there was a and she had climbed through. Like I say, I think that cop should have fired into the air a couple of times while they were banging on those windows. Because I don't know if that cop thought like, well, if there are more people who could come through, they're going to shoot them. But
do any of them have guns out there?
What's that?
Like any of the protesters have guns?
Well, that's the thing. He doesn't know.
Like, I think, every state killing is lamentable, but I look at January 6th and I'm frankly shocked at the restraint shown by the security folks. And I think that is, I agree that like maybe in the moment he could have fired a warning shot, but again, like, you don't know what the mindset is and like how worried you are about like who else is in that crowd.
And the restraint was evident from the top down by the fact that they weren't seeing it as a legitimate threat in terms of preparation. And so, of course, when they're underprepared, this is what is going to happen. And like, this is a part of the, first it was Antifa agitators, then, now it's deep state woke people who are infiltrating and provocateurs from that group. And now it's we have to get back to Trump saying it's a Democratic operative, essentially. This is a part of, what they're gonna keep propagating. Charlie Kirk doxed the guy too, the cop on Fox News the other day, and I mean, I fear for this person's safety for sure.
I would imagine militant apathy on the IM, who I believe is a former police officer. Cops are not trained to fire in the air, bro. Of Ashley Babbitt, had Ashley Babbitt been black, this wouldn't even be an issue. She didn't comply. I mean, yeah. Right, but which is not to justify this, because I would have a problem with it, on those grounds anyways. But let's also be clear. They're functioning as security guards here, right? This isn't a question of policing. This is not, this is not like we're going out and busting some heads at this rally. They're behind, they're behind barricades and like, don't come after us is basically what
they're behind barricades. And everybody, like Babbitt should have heard that there was a gun there, because everyone's like, hey, gun. Yes. And again, I just think the point of emphasis is she was killed by the Republicans who lied about the election.
Yeah.
And the crowd screaming, hang Mike Pence. So, I mean, it's like it would be as if somebody was just chanting at cops, this is the murder I'm going to commit. Like, of course there's going to be some sort of response. But
this is, Trump and Maria Bartiromo. That is, that they're going to try and create a martyr out of her. And to some extent, it's probably going to be successful. On some level. Let's go to some IMs. Paranoid Crowder Defender. Love the Devil's Dictionary reference, Matt. When will Sam come out of hiding and debate Dr. Drew on masking requirements? Sam Seder's Sexy Gams. Reporting from deep in Crowder Town after spending the weekend with libertarian friends. Is that your inability to go on the Joe Rogan show is proof you are a fraud and liar who shouldn't be debated because you care more about promoting yourself than the ideas being challenged or defended. You might have cracked the surface with Crowder, but it seems like you really need to get on the Joe Rogan experience to break into Chudland. Yes, well, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's, I'm not exactly sure what Rogan's reasoning is, but frankly, once the big issue that I had with Rogan is he wasn't allowing any left-wing voices on at all. And once he had Kalinsky on and Packman and Bernie and Cornel West, it felt less important to me. And once he left California, because I was also, at the time, I was interested in being on the show. There was somebody I wanted to see in California, and that would have been a way of doing it.
Also, Joe Rogan was fully aware of who Michael Brooks was during that time, but did not extend that invitation, even though, certain people that might have appeared on Joe Rogan's show might have lobbied for it because Joe Rogan was afraid of offending some of Joe Rogan's friends.
Yeah.
That Michael would criticize.
Without a doubt.
I think Joe
Without a
Rogan
doubt.
is a bit of a chicken shit.
Right. I mean, that there's no doubt that's a big part of it. Guitar Scar. How can I find Emma's interview on Peacock? I searched The Choice, The Majority Report, her name, and nothing works. Look for The Majority Report. And when you find The Majority Report, her interviews will be on that show because they bank the second show, not the first show.
They archive for 30 days the
Yeah.
interview show, so it's under the same umbrella there.
Yeah. They don't archive the Majority Report.
They just stream it at 10 p.m. Eastern.
Correct. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Sam isn't the only one with pronunciations issue. Every time Emma talks about the greatest quarterback of all time, she pronounces Tom Brady wrong. Fluffing the aggrievement pillow. Hard to believe you guys are back in studio. Can we have a pan around to see that handsome crew? We don't have the technological ability to do that quite yet.
We also have a
soon.
big secret.
Oh, big secret in here too. Calip Goose King. Goose King. Hello, Majority Report crew. Can I get a shofar? It's my 9th anniversary as a member. I've been a fan since Sam's first Air America show with Janine. Keep up the good work. Peach is going. That's a deep cut. We would have done some type of when we had planned to do the 10-year anniversary in November, we should have done a trivia thing. Like Peaches would be on the trivia. You don't know what it means, do you?
No.
You're not going to find out because I don't want you to crash the trivia contest. Sorry.
Okay.
Inesha Fool. Sam, do you have an Instagram? My mom wants the place to admire photos of you. Tank top pics would be what she prefers. I do not have an Instagram. I had a sock puppet account that I would just use to follow Mila.
Good for you.
What do you mean?
I mean, I don't know.
Why are you looking at me like that's creepy?
No, it's not
She knew it was
creepy.
me.
She
knew it was me.
I was like,
it wasn't really a sock puppet account. It's just I don't post on Instagram. I don't even know how to work it. I just knew how to go to her page.
But a sock puppet implies you're pretending to be someone else, and I thought you were pretending to be a kid so you could see her Instagram.
Hey man, I really love your.
My name's
image.
Blaze.
Yay, what's up?
I love TikTok.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like that.
Poggers.
It wasn't really a sock puppet account. Really, it was just like a hollow account. TLL. The point I didn't get to yesterday when I called in was that I had very little idea of how to approach a scary new injury with no insurance that threatens my livelihood. Thank you, the IAMer, Julia, who mentioned workers' comp, which seemed to be the correct path for me. Thank you to Sam and crew for listening to me during one of the toughest days of my short life, and I'm sorry anybody frustrated they had to listen to a rambling, emotional call like mine left his best. Don't worry about it.
No.
Glad you got some help. Folks, a great resource for folks in this community is the Discord that we have. You go to majoritydiscord.com, you sign up, it's completely free. Great folks in there who are very knowledgeable about a wide range of things and can help in those situations. Low energy Don Jr. sniff. I think it's a huge mistake said by your guest stating that the Federalist Society is just helping white conservatives as their function is to keep the oligarchy of capital in power, regardless of being conservative or not. I think that's a good point. I mean, I think there's at least multiple, some of it's social for some of the people, but for a large extent, yes, it is for moneyed interests. We could solve the core problem, but we all know why we don't, and it's not just the Federalist Society. I think it's a huge yes. I think there's a point. There's a good point there. Milton Apathy, bro. After asking years of asking why Dems don't use the power they have to save voting rights, I've concluded that 20-30% of the Democratic caucus really don't want black people to vote either. They would rather hide their own discomfort with the browning of America behind the Republicans' outright racism. They don't want to be the white person who gave the country away to the other. I think that's possible to a certain extent. I think the last IMer also may have, an answer there too. That it may not just be a function of race. It could also be a function of, in this instance, where race is a proxy for moneyed interests, or, you know, contrary to moneyed interests. I don't think it's one or the other. To be fair, on the voting rights, it was, you know, there was an assault by the Supreme Court. There was been attempts to fix that Section 5 voting rights. And, you know, you could be just describing Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, frankly. There may be others who are against the filibuster, but they're not. They're going to wither if those two sign on. But yes. Salt Lake Sean, Garfield County, Utah, is charging a woman with a hate crime for stomping on a back the blue sign. Charging document states she crumbled it in a destructive manner while smirking in an intimidating manner. Interesting.
Ooh,
Be very careful about that.
Smirk.
Peachy Keen finally checked off Sam calling the guest the wrong name of my MR Boomer moment bingo card. Just need Sam assuming it's still the year 2000 when calculating how many decades it's been since something happened. I feel like that's pretty close. Fat Story Editor, I've been a longtime fan of the Majority Report with Sam Kinison. Really cool. If you really want to insult him, call him Ari Fleischer. Former presidential wardrobe coordinator. Sam, since you brought it up, I want to convince that I was the one who stole Obama's comfortable shoes back then, which kept him off the picket line. Sorry, everybody. Attorney Genital Janet Reno. If I ever run for office, the Fun Half song would be my campaign theme song. Henry, Sam, love the new Fun Time mix. I watched the show where Cross came on, and you got the new sample. Well done. Thank you, Henry. Josh from Connecticut. Emma, how do you feel about the Rangers talking trade offers for Buchnevich?
It depends on if they're trading him for future assets. I don't think that's a good idea. But if this is a part of a larger package for Jack Eichel with Buffalo, honestly, Buffalo's so fucking stupid. You could probably trade less to get him. I would prefer if it was like 2 first-rounders and like Nils Lundqvist, etc. But I'd be sad to say goodbye to Buchnevich. I don't know if they'll bite because he's a restricted free agent, and they would have to extend him. So my point is, yeah. Anyway,
none of it.
If we get Eichel, it'll be worth it.
There you have it. Majority Retort. In honor of your debate with Yaron, I've recommended having the authors of mine on the show. They discussed the ambiguity surrounding the concepts of ownership and property rights and how that ambiguity was used to do things like justify colonization or dispossess black farmers of their land. Sam's butt joint. I'm very upset about the continuing genocide of the Uyghurs. I'll be burning all my Pokemon plushies in my backyard. Quick, funny circumcision story. I was sitting with my sister and we were talking about our earliest memories, and I said I could swear that I remember my circumcision. And she said, I would think so. You were 4. Mom and Dad got lazy and you started getting infections. So they said, F it. Yeah, had you snipped. Oh, damn it. Oof. Not in favor.
I'll just say I'm glad I don't remember mine.
Oh, Nomi, we should say Nomi is out today. I don't know exactly what it was, but she couldn't do it today. All right. Cedar Simp. Larry Elder is officially running for California governor. Perhaps the conservative coffers are running dry and they need a new grift. I think I told everybody this story about Larry Elder, where we were talking to Janine and I, and he was like, it's all game day. It's game day. He was just a total grift. Oh, he said, leave it on the field. Exactly. That's what it was. Prairie Fire Kowalski. Hey, Emma, MR Crew, and Farmer Sam. I don't know anything about the apple production on the Cedar Orchards, but unfortunately my sole apple tree was lost in the wind last Friday. Also, a considerable number of trees fell on power lines, roads, and buildings. The apple trees I've had the best luck with, Arkansas Blacks. They seem to be the most robust. And frankly, fast-growing trees. But I know he probably buys them in bulk. In general, last week had nasty weather overall with wet bulb temperature last in the British Northwest. Droughts reducing the Southwest USA and Northwest Mexican water reservoirs to historic lows. Of course, the East Coast getting hammered with storms was big, but we learned the heat wave in the Pacific Northwest likely killed 1 billion animals, mostly in the ocean. With conditions like this, I'm concerned about the long-term situation in agriculture to produce a surplus every year, not much policy-wise. It's come out of Biden's USDA. Lastly, Emma, I can't get Sam to email me back. Has he liked this off and left his poggers? You got to email me one more time, Kowalskis. I cannot find your emails.
The answer is yes. He is always like this.
I am always like that.
Although we don't really communicate via email, but you always will say that you need few email reminders.
All right. Final call of the day, calling from a 512 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Jeff from Austin, Texas.
Jeff from Austin, Texas. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind? A few things. Texas is ridiculous. I just wanted to get that out of the way.
Fair enough.
Don't hold my citizen status against me. But one thing I wanted to talk about is just the whole topic of checking privilege, because I started doing that, and I talked to some of my minority friends, and I found out their experiences, which made me mad. It made me sad when I thought about it. But then I just kept going, and I started thinking of the privilege of living in the U.S. and how just globally, if you've got a fridge with food in it and electricity, you're doing better than a considerable amount of people. And the whole American experience it's just built on like slave labor in other countries and just suffering. Like, I don't know even how to buy anything, how to buy food or anything that isn't impacting someone just terribly. And I just don't know how to, I'm kind of paralyzed right now in this privilege checking. And I feel powerless and guilty. And I also wish more people understood just how much of our great first world lives are compared to the rest of the planet, and just the suffering that is the cost of our great lives and air conditioning with nice cars and access to things.
Well, one thing you've just sort of like come across probably without unintentionally is exactly why the conservative media feeds an aggrievement narrative and a narrative that says do not doubt yourself, because it's really hard when you are conscious of what you've just articulated to figure out emotionally how to like deal with it and how to compartmentalize it enough that you can sort of live your life and be happy, but also not so much that you don't feel like you're servicing that awareness. I mean, it requires like, it's a hard thing to do, to like, and you need to navigate ultimately for yourself, like where you're going to forgive yourself for the limitations of what you're able to do, and what you're going to do, what's within your ability to do something about. I mean, that's the challenge there. That's really hard.
And I think why it might be depressing is kind of what you alluded to in your comment, which is you mainly feel empowered as a consumer, which is like, so when you come across like you're not able to buy anything or purchase anything because it's all baked into the system. Well, yeah, capitalism doesn't exist without exploitation. So I wouldn't worry too much around your own political consumption habits. The best thing to do, I think, would be less, looking at your own morality and place in the world, and make connections with people and organize for political changes, because that's ultimately what is the only thing that's going to ameliorate or has ever ameliorated any of these things, which is that people working together in their own communities. So I think once you've realized there's a problem with inequality in the world, you need to start working about it rather than, I guess, collecting new instances of it.
And about like self-flagellation, because that, I mean, like I say, you got to figure out for yourself, like what you can do on an individual level, but where you're comfortable and whatnot. But the end of the day, you got to organize in some ways to create some type of structural change.
Because I don't think the personal guilt is super helpful. I mean, just me personally, like my parents homesteaded North Dakota after the Sioux were wiped out of the place, and like there's
Your
some
parents
guilt there.
did?
Well, not my parents. I guess. Sorry.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, they weren't homesteading in the 60s, but my ancestors in like the 1910s or whatever, right? They were given land, and that's a huge part of like our family lore. We go back to the homestead where like it was really like it was like sod. It wasn't even wood. Like so, it was like a hole on the prairie. And that's a big moment for our family, but I think you have to incorporate it into a wider history of why that opportunity was presented to you. But we're all ultimately in this together. We're all victims of this sort of enclosure. Certain people just lucked out of it in the last 100 years or so, but it's coming for all of us, I would say.
All right, we'll take that.
Okay.
Appreciate the call.
Thanks a lot.
All right, one more 20-second call. You got 20 seconds, 509. Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Ronald Reagan.
Oh. That's my bull.
Just wanted to say real quick, I've only got 20 seconds. I was also circumcised so that I'd have a cool-looking dick, and I'm glad that I was because it fucking worked. Thanks.
Great last call of the day. God. Okay. Yeah, boop, boop. All right. There you go. Old, cool-looking dick, Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan's ray gun.
Yep. Cool-looking ray gun. All right. A couple IMs and we're gone. Nerd Cheetah. How sick is it that we live in a time where the ability for obscenely rich to escape the planet they've destroyed for a space excursion is celebrated? How much more telling is it that there's no actual party to the left of the left pointing this out, that this is sickness? Yeah.
I mean, I think there's people pointing it out. You certainly see some anxiety from like Elon Musk on Twitter saying a lot of people that naysay us don't understand that space represents hope. The problem is
hope for a very limited amount of people.
Yeah, and we've got to the point where these billionaires can author what hope is meant to be for people, which is, I think, not a good state of affairs.
I wasn't a huge fan of The Expanse. I don't know if you saw this sci-fi show, but the first couple episodes are worth watching just because of the premise of basically when humans start to leave this planet. Some stay, some go to Mars, some go to work the belt, essentially, which is like where the hard labor happens. They do the mining that basically supports the Mars colony and the Earth, and that is a troubling, but you get the sense like somebody has a good vision of what's going to happen.
Also, I think like the vision of colonizing Mars when these guys talk about it is just like the form of boosterism, like when we're trying to lure settlers to America. Like, look at this amazing thing we're going to happen. The real play is they're going to, lock up rocketry and like near Earth space travel for the nearer term future.
Yeah.
The American Party of Labor, it's not that government is bad, it's the vast majority of officials elected and otherwise service for-profit business over the needs of the people. Government is great, but there are people who get elected into government whose message is government bad. The purpose is to dismantle the government functions that service regular working people. Indeed. All right, two more. Sam's fast-growing cannabis trees. Average of 100 year people loss of their average of 100 per year people lose all of most of their penis from complications from circumcision surgery in the U.S. I'm a dad, and that number weighed heavy on me with my son. Love you guys. I was not aware of that. Judy Ruliani, have the lumber prices affected your hobby? Indeed. But I think they're starting to come down. I bought a piece of plywood a while back. It was $80 for a piece of like pretty straightforward birch ply. It was nuts. But I'll tell you what it did.
Take it out in a plastic bag?
Huh?
Did you take it out of there in a plastic bag?
Exactly. But I'll tell you what it did do is I, for the first time, really planned how I was going to cut that board in a way that I would use every single piece of it. Like good carpenters do that. They get the lumber and they don't just randomly cut. They like plan out, I'm taking this piece first and that piece second so that I can have the longer piece here. So that was a good exercise for me. It used to be like, yeah, you get $24 for a piece of plywood. You're like, okay.
I'm so glad you're sharing this.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is my draft. This is my version of the draft, of the Giants draft.
Fine. Yeah.
There you go.
You got.
Final IM of the day from Rob from Dedham. Can we get a Sam Seder, misspelled your name, DIY tutorial on tech and woodworking in lieu of no AM quickie? Should have done it. I should have done it. I just built a cabinet that looks pretty good, but maybe someday. That's my retirement play.
I am interested in the finished product.
All right, folks. Emma, Matt, Brendan, other people, good job today. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar.